Welcome to this short webinar on batteries. My name is Stina Torjesen and I'm an associate professor at the University of Agder. Yesterday, the European Commission presented its proposal on the new regulation on batteries. The underlying aim is to spur the development of a new battery value chains that can supply sustainable batteries in a circular and climate neutral economy. In essence, the regulation wants to change the European battery market from one driven by price to one driven by sustainability. By doing this, the European Commission delivers on promises set out in the European Green Deal and the Circular Economy Action Plan. Indeed, with this regulation, we see a European Union that is willing to translate an ambitious green political vision into practical, feasible measures. We are very pleased to have Mr. Mattia Pellegrini from the European Commission with us in this webinar. Mr. Pellegrini is one of the key architects behind the regulation and serves as head of unit in DG Environment. We also have Mr. Thore Sekkenes with us. Mr. Sekkenes is program director at the European Battery Alliance at InnoEnergy Scandinavia, and he will comment on Pellegrini's presentation. And you, the audience, you're very welcome to put forward questions in our chat function that we can bring in with us in our comment session. Please note that this webinar is recorded, and we will also end with a closing remark on from Strand, Sjaastad, the Deputy Chief of the Norwegian Mission to the EU on behalf of Ambassador to the EU, Rolf Einar Fife. With that, please, Mr. Pellegrini, we know you have a very busy schedule. Please go ahead and enlighten us.
So good morning, everybody, and it is a pleasure to be with you. Unfortunately, I cannot stay for the entire event as originally was planned. And indeed, the reason is really the adoption of the new batteries regulation. As you know, it was adopted yesterday, and already the work with the co-legislator is already starting today and already on Monday of next week. So we have an extremely busy agenda. Today, our commissioner is participating to the ENVI committee of the European Parliament to present the proposal. And on Monday, the Council Working Group on Environment of the Environmental Council will already start discussion on the batteries proposal. I want to start with that point because it gives you an idea of the urgency behind the proposal. So not only the Commission has done a fast-track record in adopting the proposal. I can tell you that my life has been significantly changed due to this proposal, in the sense that, okay, we are in a COVID and pandemic situation, but I couldn't have a single vacation over the last year. So essentially, I've used 0 days of vacation of my entire year, which has never happened in the 20 years I've worked in the Commission. So that's, I think on its own is already a pretty amazing fact. And my colleagues as well, we've been working with the summit because, as you know, before the legislative proposal, you need an impact assessment. Now, let me just say very quickly a few things. Why, basically, this proposal, and I've I think in your presentation, in the Word document, we have used the word pioneering. I totally agree, because this is indeed is a groundbreaking regulation, in the sense that it's a total novel way of doing environmental legislation. As you know, and this is the job of my unit, until now we have been doing legislation based on the, let's say, if you take a life cycle assessment of a product, focusing at the end of the product, of the life of the product. So on the waste side, working on recycling target, on reuse targets. With the batteries proposal, for the first time, we take the full life cycle of the proposal. So we move from the extraction of the raw materials, which they go on the batteries, all the way down to recycling and second use. And let me just briefly mention what are the building blocks of this proposal. So the first element, as I said, is the extraction. You need the raw materials. And as you know, unfortunately, we import these raw materials from all over the world. If you take the two most famous raw materials, which they go in a lithium-ion battery, which are lithium and cobalt, they come, in the case of lithium, more than 70% comes from Chile. In the case of cobalt, around 68% comes from Congo. So not only we import from all over the world, we import from very specific regions in the world. Whereas, you know, there are specific problems related to the environment, to human rights, to social conditions. I mean, notably in the case of Congo, there is also an issue of minor of the children involvement in the mining activities. So for that reason, we have decided to introduce a mandatory due diligence approach for these critical raw materials. Then, second element, we have introduced again for the first time in the history of European legislation, mandatory, and I've seen this is also underlined in your Word document, conditions for placing batteries into the market, what we call sustainability requirements. Notably, there are two of them, very important ones. One is carbon footprint. So in order to place a battery into the market, companies will have to respect a specific carbon threshold. How do we arrive to this carbon threshold? We do it by steps. First, labeling requirements. After labeling requirements, there will be carbon footprint classes. So a bit what you have in the fridges. When you buy a fridge, there is an energy label, you have the different classes, and you can choose as a consumer. And then the third element will be, as of 2027, a specific mandatory threshold. In 2027, basically, when we establish a threshold, at that point, if the batteries is above that threshold in terms of CO2, will no longer be possible to place that batteries in the European market. So it's a very clear message also to the rest of the world that needs to comply. Second element, I'm very proud also of that, we have introduced mandatory recycled content for batteries, notably for lithium and cobalt, but also for manganese and other important metals. In that way, what implies is that by 2030, why 2030? Some people may comment it's too far, 2030. No, it's not too far because we have done an assessment. To have a mandatory recycled content, you need that the first generation of electric vehicles batteries come to an end of its life. So the production is starting now in Europe in terms of gigafactory. So we estimate that by 2030 there will be enough lithium, enough cobalt, enough manganese to be reprocessed in the new batteries. So that is also a total novelty, mandatory recycled content. And of course, also here, I mentioned this as a condition for placing batteries into the market. If a battery post 2030 will not have the right level of recycled content, will no longer be possible to place it into the market. And then, if we move to the more classical part, we will have for sure collection targets, which by the way is an implicit collection target for electric vehicles and industrial batteries of 100%. Much lower for the portable batteries, the one of all of us we use at home, because as you know, the current target for portable batteries, which is not achieved by, unfortunately, by half of the member states, is 45%. But we are being very ambitious because we're moving the target also for portable batteries to 65% collection by 2025 and 70% by 2030 for portable batteries, which is a smaller market, but it's also an important market in terms of consumer. And of course, instead for the others, we have an implicit target in the regulation of 100% collection. We don't want any single of these batteries to be lost in the market because they are too precious. Let me also say as a final word, we have very ambitious recycling and recovery efficiency targets. Again, when you look at the numbers, for some of them are really impressive. And final point, very important point as well, we have also established rules for second life. I mean, I suppose here many of you are experts. Our estimates, our impact assessment has estimated that between 20 to 30% of the electric vehicles batteries at the end, yeah, there are no slides, don't worry. But I think normally I'm famous to be pretty clear in my way of presenting and quite structured. In terms of the last point is second life. So second life, we have estimates that between 20 to 30% of the batteries will be ready for second life. What is second life? Is that the batteries can be dismantled, you take out the cells, and then you can repurpose the batteries, remanufacture the batteries for energy storage. So in the new regulation, again, groundbreaking, has never been done before in environmental legislation, we have what are the conditions in terms of state of the health and having a contract ready, under which the product, if it meets, even if it's a product, normally a product at the end of its life, as you know, is waste. And when it's waste, in the case of a battery, it means hazardous waste. So there will be huge cost associated with it. We have done it in the other way around. We said, if these conditions are met, the product, also if it's at the end of its life, can be remanufactured and repurposed for energy storage, and therefore remains a product. In that way, we will lower significantly the cost of remanufacturing and repurposing, and we hope that we can boost this new activity, which is repurposing and remanufacturing of batteries in Europe. It will be one of these famous green jobs that often we hear about, and this will be a concrete example. And of course, there will be the classical rules also in terms of extended producer responsibility and labeling. Actually, I want to just, indeed, this will be my final point, labeling, also because I'm very attached to that. Again, groundbreaking legislation, pioneering, as you have said, first time again in European legislation, digital passport for batteries. For the first time, the labeling obligation will not be the traditional label, but will have to be done in a digital form, and all the data will be concentrated in a specific database that will also be accessible to the European Commission, but also to consumer and producer of cars, in order to compare. Of course, we will have to be very careful in establishing this exchange database, because, by the way, it will be an exchange database that when everything will be ready, with the production which is going to increase by 700%, we estimate it can have the size of the Amazon platform, just to give you an idea what we're talking about. We will have also, of course, to preserve in this database not all the information which are in the digital passport will be available, because of course some of them are confidential information, so we don't want to disclose that. So what we aim at the end is that we aim that there will be sustainable production of batteries in Europe, being European producer. I mean, you know, there are two famous ones. One is called Sjaastad, the other one is called Northvolt, is in actually Sweden, in the Scandinavian countries. But there will also be the others, and I'm very happy actually, because actually this has happened in Norway, that Panasonic has decided to invest massively in Norway to build a gigafactory in Norway. And why Norway? So we are actually attracting investment in Norway with our legislation, because indeed they know that there will be this carbon footprint. And Norway is very interesting from a renewable energy point of view. So they know that if they build it in Norway, they can produce batteries with very low CO2 content. So what we have seen the same with Tesla in Germany, with the gigafactory of Tesla in Germany, with the Chinese now moving to Poland. So we are seeing that third countries, and we welcome third country investment, are coming to Europe, because they are estimating that to produce batteries in their own let's say, territory, and then to export to Europe, they will have problem of compliance with our legislation. So they are investing here, and they will produce all of them according to our environmental and social rules. So that's, yes, the Vice President Šefčovič has insisted a lot on that. That is indeed, personally, I'm extremely happy for that, because it's indeed, it's really the essence of the Green Deal. What our President of the Commission said, the Green Deal is an industrial policy. And that is the example. I mean, the example of Panasonic in Norway is an example that via this environmental legislation, we have stimulated sustainable investment in Europe. I've been already too long, but my commissioner is still speaking. So until he speaks, it's okay, because I know what he's talking about, because we wrote the speech for him. But I had to connect immediately as soon as the members of parliament they start to ask questions, because we don't know what are the questions.
That's great. This is true multitasking, Mr. Pellegrini, and thank you so much for that. That is a very, very nice tour of the new regulation. Thore, do you have a comment or a question for Mr. Pellegrini?
Well, my first comment would be a deep congratulation from the European Battery Alliance to this major achievement that has been performed. It is possibly the if I bring out the single most important event in the short history of the European battery industry. It was probably yesterday when this proposal came on. So that's my first point. I'm very impressed with what has been done. Understanding that you have to leave very, very soon.
Let me also tell you, Thore, and please ask the question, that
yes,
I have fantastic news because Linda, apparently my colleague, which is actually one of the, by the way, Scandinavia like you, or Nordic, which has been one of the master of this new innovative piece of legislation, because he has been the main lawyer together with another 2 lawyers working on the batteries proposal. Apparently she has been able to join. So I'm extremely grateful also to Linda. But please, Thore, start ask me the question. But I just want to reassure everybody that Linda will be there with you.
Excellent. So my only question to you, even though I have a very long list of questions, I think could you give us well, you have already alluded to it, but could you summarize the next steps of this legislature, how it's implemented, and then if you could bring out perhaps 2 or 3 of the important dates in the future of this legislature. As an example, I bring up the 2024 when mid 2024 when the declaration has to be in place, 27 when the CO2 limits have to be in place. But could you please summarize the most important dates in the near future or in the distant future as well?
Yes, thank you very much, Thore. Indeed, you have already framed in the right way the question. So the first point is indeed now the co-decision process. So the first things we need to do is to make sure that this proposal is adopted as fast as possible, because indeed, as you said, there will be then a number of dates which they kick in. As you have seen, the regulation is full of dates. And in order to respect the dates, each date means a secondary piece of legislation. So what we call implementing delegated acts in technical terms. To give you an idea, again, this is another record of the batteries regulation. There are 30 pieces of secondary legislation associated, if you count all of them, more than 30 pieces of secondary legislation to be produced in the coming years for each of the different steps. So indeed, so we need to really need to have a co-decision process which it is done as soon as possible. Vice President Šefčovič yesterday in the press conference, and also my commissioner Sinkevicius, which is now speaking at the parliament, said that they expect the co-decision procedure to be done in a year, by 2021. That's, if we manage, it will be another record, because normally, as you know, co-decision, there is a lot of this discussion, normally it takes 2 to 3 years. So our estimation was rather 2023, because indeed we have, but indeed the political will is there to do it as fast as possible. Then, as you said, Thore, 2024 will be an important date, because by that date already the number of labeling obligation in terms of putting in your label what is the content of CO2 produced, what is the level of carbon, of recycled content. They will already be kicking in. So we need to be ready. As I said, in 2024, there will not be as such, this will only be labeling obligation. So they will not stop a battery, which is still a bit polluting, to be placed on the market. But there will be transparency from day one in the market. And by the way, for each of these rules, we will need to have one of these famous pieces of secondary legislation, because if you need to label recycled content, you need the methodology to measure and verify recycled content to avoid that there are people which are cheating on the market. So 2024 will be indeed the very important year, but then I would say 2027 will be even more important, as you said, because in 2027 and 2030 as well, for recycled content, will be dates in which for carbon threshold is 2027, for recycled content is 2030. If you do not comply, you cannot place anymore your batteries into the European market. So at that point, we know that there are some concern by third countries sometimes, which have been expressed. But we believe that actually this could be a model, a bit like REACH, the chemical legislation, has been a model for the rest of the world to follow. So we really hope that we can actually guide the rest of the world to follow this ambitious approach.
Thank you very much for that comprehensive answer. And I believe that we should let you go now to take care of more of even more important things. And I think I leave it to you, Stina. I think we have Linda online.
Yes, exactly. Very good. So thank you again, Mr. Pellegrini. We're extremely grateful. Thank you.
And I'm also grateful, let me say, to Linda, which is a fantastic colleague. And I left it there. My morning started very early at 6 o'clock, but with the Nordic people, you can, I mean, I'm an atypical Italian, let's put it like this. But the Nordic is normal to work early, so I'm very happy that Linda has managed to join, and very grateful on my side to Linda. Thank you very much.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much. I'll now transition to Linda. Let me just say a few words as we transition over to Linda, and we'll have a conversation, both Thore and I, with Linda. But so just to rehearse the key points from Pellegrini is really 6 points. Yeah, it's that I take away from the regulation and also from his presentation. One is on carbon, on targets on CO2 footprint that will come in stages and kick in towards the end of the 2020s. The second is the targets on recycled content. First, again, starting with declaration, information, classification, and then moving into actual solid targets on recycled content. Again, regulation from the European Commission here. Thirdly, Mr. Pellegrini touched on the battery passport, the fact that there will be digital information accompanying every major battery in the European market, and the need, in a sense, to develop digital solutions for that to happen. And here we know, of course, that there will be an interplay between what's happening in Europe and the Global Battery Alliance. Fourthly, of course, Pellegrini touched on waste, which is more, as he said, a more classical part of this type of regulation. It's been with us in former directives, but now they're stepping up the targets on waste, and again, making it very expensive or very hard to have battery waste. And then finally, we also have quite a lot of elements related to second life, secondary use, the idea that we can repurpose and use batteries for other functions than simply just purely recycling them. So that is really some of the key elements which touched on now with Pellegrini. And I think let us now run through them perhaps more in detail. While you are preparing your question, Thore, I will ask my question first to you, Linda. So again, wonderful to have you here, Linda. We're very grateful that you could step in. That's just incredibly flexible and very helpful. So Linda, my question is, so there's both substantial regulation on recycled content and very, very detailed, a clear plan on mandatory recycled content in around 10 years' time. We also have regulation on secondary use. What is your thoughts on that? Is that a kind of harmonious relationship from the European Commission perspective? Do you prioritize one over the other, or this is just a more kind of neutral regulation where you want to see both fields evolving constructively forward? What's your thoughts there, Linda?
Yeah, indeed, it's a balance that we have tried to strike, because indeed, if we go for second life, there will be less material available for reaching the recycled content targets. So what we have tried to do is to, especially for the second life, to enable, let's say, a market to develop. Not to hamper it, not to prevent it in any way, to enable it, and then it's up to the market itself, the industry, the market actors to see whether this market indeed can develop and can evolve and to become something profitable. So this has been our motive and our intent behind this.
Very good. Yeah, that's a very useful reflection for us to keep in mind. Yeah, thank you. Thore, what about you? What would you like to flag?
On that last question that you brought up, then I'm, as I understand, and now in these 24 hours that the document has been available to me, as I understand it, then it opens for both roads, so to say, which I think is a very good way of doing it. I don't think that the EU Commission should impose one or the other. It should set the rules for both roads. So I think that's a very good choice. On that very discussion, then I've heard a lot of people discussing: should we recycle or should we reuse? So there are arguments pro and con. What is sure is that recycling the batteries that are out there will of course give a benefit to building new batteries. And if I take a small detail, if you take an old battery, the cobalt in one battery is perhaps enough to make 5 new batteries. So from that context, it's good to reuse. However, the demand side is increasing so rapidly, more than what most people think, actually. So the few batteries out there will by far not be enough to satisfy this. So the idea that we already have enough out there to sustain a market is unfortunately incorrect, because the demand is growing exponentially, as they say. Mm-hmm. So I think that I think I leave it at that. I think it's clear. Let's leave both roads open. Very important that both roads are open, clear, defined, as has been done in the regulation. Would you allow me to present a few slides on the European Battery Alliance and then come right back to this conversation?
Sure, I could, if I just could add one point to what you just said. Indeed, yeah, keeping both roads open, and we also have in the article on recycled content, we have the last paragraph which says that the Commission will continue to follow the availability of the recycled content, so that indeed, if we would have made a let's say inaccurate assessment of the percentages that is now in the proposal, and that they will not be reached, for instance, because they're simply not enough available, then we have the possibility there to take action and to change those targets. So I think we've covered ourselves in that regard.
Yeah.
Thank you. Please.
Great, flexible. Yeah. So yeah, Thore, bring in the slides and give us your broader thoughts. I think that would be very constructive. And Linda, you stay with us a bit longer, and we'll have a few more questions. We also have some very good questions from the audience that we would like to flag towards the very end. But please, Thore.
Yes. So I share my screen, and you should be seeing something soon. Could you please confirm if something is appearing on the screen?
Yep.
Let me put it into like that. Okay, very, very briefly, short introduction. What is the European Battery Alliance? Well, it's an alliance which consists of a number of different entities, most of them being companies, but there are also investors, there are innovation and academia stakeholders, the European Commission's various different parts of it are in there as well. We have, all of us in there, we have the common task of building a competitive and sustainable battery industry. And a careful assessment of how big this could be is that in 5 years, we estimate that the complete value chain could represent as much as 250 billion euros, which to me is a very large number. One more comment on this slide. We we of course look at the complete value chain from raw materials, going through all the different stages, all the way to recycling or second life that we just commented. Next slide. What does the European Battery Alliance provide to its members? Well, basically these 4 areas, but we will today only focus on regulatory insights. And the middle point says update on upcoming legislation. I'm now happy that I can change this and talk about already implemented legislations, or in the process at least. So this is spot on what we would like to be doing. Yes, moving on. We set back in 2017, we set up a number of key objectives on how to establish this battery industry. That was broken down into concrete actions and high priority actions. And guess what? The legislation that is now on the table since yesterday is one of those priority actions. So it's spot on. The Commission and all the players in the industry are in fact delivering on the original actions and objectives. So that's a very nice thing to be able to say now. The rest of the slide just shows the activities and the milestones that the European Battery Alliance have been doing during these 3-4 years that we've existed. Moving on, we are today 560 members. They are distributed across the value chain as this slide shows. The numbers refer to the number of companies or entities or organizations in that part of the value chain. And as you see, there are many that go across the whole value chain as well. Moving on. Yes, then I have 2 slides basically saying what Mr. Pellegrini stated. There are 3 objectives, 3 main objectives of this regulation, and we will talk about them in a moment. One is strengthening the function of the internal market. Here, I hope we come back to level playing field, incentivizing investments and so on, promoting a circular economy and a creation of a resilient supply chain, and ultimately reducing environmental and social impacts. These are the ground objectives of this legislation. I also have included a simplistic view of the battery market. I think we will be able to come back to this. This points out the 13 different measures and where they apply in the life of a battery, so to say. But I think I will not go through all of these at the moment. Perhaps we will touch upon the most important as we go on. With that, I end my presentation, and back to you, Stina.
Very good. Thank you so much, Thore. I think that is very useful perspectives, and I think the European Battery Alliance is key in that. So, Linda, to follow up on some of Thore's points. So, I have 2 questions I want to flag to you, and we have 3 questions from the audience as well. So, let me start with my 2 questions, and then we'll bring in the audience. So, my 2 questions is, so one, the first one is on consensus. What's your expectation moving forward? Clearly, this has been fast-tracked, but there seems to have been a very substantial dialogue, kind of as the regulation has been developed, so that there is an understanding of the different positions. And my impression is that there is quite a lot of consensus on the direction forward, both within the institutions in the EU and the larger players in Europe. So is that a correct assessment from my side? A comment on that would be very useful. My second point is on level playing field, and that's mentioned very directly both in the press conference yesterday and in the regulation, that clearly what you're achieving now is a with a level playing field for the European market. Again, a market where now sustainability will be as big of a driver as price, and it will be uniform across the European market. So you're achieving a European level playing field. What about the global level playing field? What's the thoughts from the European Commission in creating global level playing fields? Pellegrini touched on it briefly, but your thoughts on that would be very much appreciated. So comment on those, one or two of those elements, and then I'll bring in 3 more specific questions afterwards. Please, Linda.
Yes, on the first point on the consensus for the proposal, indeed, I think this proposal is historic, maybe even in that sense that we have been, well, it's a common proposal from DG Env and DG Grow, as you probably know, and which usually have a bit opposing interests, I would say, in other files, but here indeed we have brought our knowledge together to come up with a package that covers the whole life cycle, indeed. So. Yes, there is an agreement on the common line forward. We have, seeing that this is a really truly global market, it comes a bit to the second question already. We have also worked closely with our with DG on which work more international trade, to come up with a common line also there, seeing that this is also a bit the model that will be followed also for other product policy, sustainable product policy that is coming up in next year and in the coming months. So let's hope that we have agreed something that will be a common line. I know that there are conflicting interests, and member states also might disagree with the line that we are taking, but we think that in order to indeed create a common level playing field for all stakeholders involved in the battery market in Europe, and to have common rules that apply simultaneously and at the same time and to the same extent, like to have the same ambition, let's say, this is the proposal that we have come up with. So I must say I don't really I didn't catch what Mattia was saying on the global level playing field, so I hope I will not contradict him. But yeah, we want with this proposal to start a race to the top, basically, for all players on the market, so including producers that are situated outside the EU. Our purpose is not to have them relocate into Europe, but we want to have the batteries that are sold here on our European market, which is an important market on the global level. We wanted to have good batteries, sustainable batteries, and not to, how can I say, transfer the problems that we have with carbon emissions and so forth to other parts of the world, because that would not make sense, basically. So this is what we hope to achieve. Yeah,
very good. Thore?
Yes, if I may include some comments on. First of all, the consensus part. Evidently, I was not directly involved in the good work that was done by the Commission. That did for sure. However, I spent the last 24 hours in calling a number of the key stakeholders out in the industry, in the battery industry, and these are both manufacturers, these are OEMs or car manufacturers, these are investors. So I've managed to call at least a dozen of different companies. And the impression I get from my side is that there is a very high degree of consensus that this has to be, this legislation has to be passed. I especially point at some of the statements I got from investors when I asked, do you think this is a good thing? And one of them said, good, this is absolutely necessary, because we we investors, we hate uncertainty, and we love certainty. So at least there is a big tick on that point. That's one comment. The second comment is on a level playing field, which is so important. And if we can achieve a global one, well, the proof is in the pudding. Let's see how that evolves. But one thing that I think will affect it is if our European market, the demand, is one of the bigger ones, and things are indicating that this is about to happen. In that case, then the mechanism that happens is that many of the manufacturers, say the car manufacturers, they will want to apply whatever rules they apply in Europe elsewhere as well, in order to not multiply the different product. So I think if we manage to push hard forward in making this European market happen, this will have a good effect on also imposing these good rules on the global market, so to say. So that's a hope that I have on this one.
Yeah.
Back to you, Stina.
Thank you, Thore, and thank you also, Linda, for these broader reflections. These are really some of the big questions associated with this, again, pioneering regulation. Let me now flag 3 specific questions that we have from the audience. And again, thank you to all of you. We have a number of questions. I apologize in advance, but we're picking out 3 questions. I'll list them all now. And then, Linda, you can either address all of them or one of them, depending on how you assess this. But let me start with the first question from Gregor Ledung from the Swedish Energy Agency. He's saying thank you to us, and he's noting that one concerned. He would like to hear more about the following: is the coming mandatory targets regarding minimal levels of recycled materials in new cells by 2030. To me, it seems that they're setting them too high, 12%, will limit the volume of new cells on the market and thereby hinder the electrification of, for example, the transport sector, where there won't be enough material in EOL cell levels available to meet the demand, i.e. Are we thinking of a 19-fold increase in volume? So again, a question on the coming mandatory targets regarding minimum level of recycled materials. Are we setting them too high? That's the first question from the Swedish Energy Agency. The second question is from Mark Mystery and the Nickel Institute. The European Commission plans to have the legislation adopted by 2022. Is this timing realistic? Knowing that most likely both Council and especially Parliament will have many proposals to be made and incorporated. So, second question, timeline. Is the ambitious timeline achievable? Second question. Third question from Ole Thomas Thomassen in the Norwegian Environment Agency. He's saying, as all of the questionnaires are, the people asking questions are saying thank you. And he's saying, regarding waste and extended producer responsibility provisions, will they, according to the proposal, apply already from 1st January 2022, including the application for registration by producers? So one more time, Ole Thomas Thomassen is asking, regarding waste and extended producer responsibility provisions, will they, in the proposal, apply already from 1st of January 2022? And does this include application for registration by producers? Okay, so that was 3 very specific questions. Linda, I think you should be very free to either select address all 3 if you want, or select your favorite question from these 3 questions. Please, Linda.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I think the first question on the recycled content we already discussed, so I wonder if we already replied to that question.
That's a good point.
Or the person didn't find the answer there, then maybe if there's another more detailed question, follow-up question to that. So I will not add anything on that.
Yeah.
On the timeline, whether the timeline is realistic, it is true. It is very, very, very ambitious. It has been a fast track within the Commission to get this out by the end of the year. And I have understood between the institutions that this will also be a fast track there. So yeah, as you know, Mr. Pellegrini and the Commissioner is already in the Parliament today, and we will start talking with the Council next week. So we have a big team on our side to have prepared the proposal, and we will continue to do this. So yeah, it is very ambitious. Let's see what we can do. Great. Especially in the current circumstances with teleworking and so forth. On the third question on the waste and EPR, the answer is no. The whole waste chapter is actually postponed until the 1st of July 2023. And this is set out clearly, I think, in Article 63 of the proposal. There are also some transitional rules at the very end. But in general, yes, the waste chapter, including the EPR, the registration and the different obligations for the waste management operators are postponed until 2023, mid-2023.
Yeah, thank you so much. So I have one more question to ask from my side. And then after that, I will ask you, Thore, if you have an additional final comment. We will give you, again, if you have any final words, Linda, and then we will proceed to the closing remark by the Deputy Chief of the Norwegian mission to the EU. But my final issue to flag is the issue of public procurement. So there is, of course, already a lot of other measures on public procurement, and this is already pushed by other EU legislation, and it's also noted, I think, within your text from yesterday that there are a lot of other things going on in a way. So what's your sense? What specifically will the battery regulation? How do you foresee that to change behaviors or push forward public procurement, specifically stemming from this piece of legislation, as opposed to others? So what changes are going to be triggered specifically from this regulation, if you may, Linda?
Well, there are batteries in so many products that we use today. So it's really, we want to make a green push simply for the public procurement and what people will, and I mean, it will range from anything, like from phones and small portable batteries, and like in computers and iPads that are used in schools and so forth, to you know, electric wheelchairs that are provided to people, to cars used by the ministers. I mean, it's really, as I said already, like a race to the top to become more green. Simply, that's what we try to trigger here.
Yeah, great, thank you. Okay, Thore, so your final reflection from your side in this.
Yes, I put all other questions aside, and I have many, but I have one that I think is appropriate. A lot has been said about the pioneering, about the first example for the Green Deal, made reference to the Circular Economy Action Plan, and so on and so forth. One supplier talks about the first CO2 transparent product in the EU, which I think is a very nice heading. And my question, what is my question? Is this a first of a new kind of legislation, do you think? Can we hope for this being now transmitted to other parts? Anything being produced? What are the next steps outside the battery industry?
Well, we hope so. I mean, the Commission is working on a new sustainable product policy initiative, and also a horizontal initiative on due diligence, which is also part of our proposal. So indeed, I think this is a blueprint also for coming policies, indeed. That this is a first for all other policies and other products.
Yeah.
Which is why I mean, so many different services were involved, and so many different opinions were expressed in order for us to come to this consensus. And I hope, yeah, I hope that it will stay like this, and that may possibly increase the ambition. Let's see. But I do think, yeah, that this is a blueprint for the future.
Great, very good, thank you. So, so with that, any final thoughts you want to give us, Linda? The participants, we range from a number of sectors, of course. We are research and development, we are companies, we are government officials, etc. And we will now all kind of position ourselves in relation to the new regulation and move forward. So any final thoughts we should keep in mind as we embark on our own preparations?
Well, I think that you should express this. If you support it, you should express it to the people that will be taking the decisions.
Yeah. Yeah.
That I think that would be my main message, because sometimes the messages that we get from industry indeed are very supportive and very yes, encouraging that we are definitely going down the right road, but they're of course opposing views. So if we want to keep the ambition as it is in the proposal, then we would definitely need support and to help us through the negotiations.
Great, thank you. I think that's very valued and a call to action to all of us. So thank you so much, Linda. We are just really appreciate the fact that you could take the time and participate here. That has been really valuable for us in this session, and particularly now at this early stage. We're all trying to digest and make sense of the new regulation, and it's just so helpful to have both you, Mr. Pellegrini, and yourself to help us with that. So we're extremely grateful for that. So with that, we bring in our final speaker. We're very fortunate to have Per Strand Sjaastad, the Deputy Chief of the Norwegian Mission to the EU. He's talking on behalf of the Ambassador to the EU, Rolf Einar Fife, and he will offer his closing reflection on this session. So please, Mr. Sjaastad, we welcome your reflection.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you very much, Stina, for giving me this chance to make some closing remarks. I must say I have listened carefully to discussions, to comments and questions, and I find this extremely interesting and encouraging as well, I should say. I think it's important also that we take a step back, perhaps, and look at the big perspective, also pointed out by various speakers here today. I think we all observe and experience that the commitment to the European Green Deal and to the green transition is very strong indeed, both in EU institutions and in capitals throughout Europe, including in Norway. Some people were perhaps a bit afraid and worried that the COVID-19 pandemic could derail or slow down these efforts. But this has not happened at all. And it seems to me that the dedication now seems even stronger than before. I can assure you that Norway will be an integrated partner in this work and these efforts based on shared ambitions and shared values in Europe. The great task of constructing a new and comprehensive framework for batteries does include several dimensions. And let me briefly make some key points, also highlighted by speakers here today. Firstly, one has the climate dimension, where batteries is one of many important tools to get the job done, which is, as we all know, to reduce and eventually terminate CO2 emissions. Secondly, how to ensure sustainable production and use of batteries. The footprint should not undermine the environment, nor the social standards, not in Europe and not beyond. Therefore, transformation of the value chain is needed as pointed out here today. Thirdly, development of the industry, focusing on how to boost investments, technology, and employment as well. Finally, the market dimension. How can we develop well-functioning markets, making batteries perhaps the preferred choice of consumers, being public as well as private, to cover needs in different sectors, such as energy and transport. I believe the broad and robust approach by the EU, and I welcome the efforts being done and the package launched yesterday, does address all these important dimensions, and also outlined by Mr. Pellegrini, Mrs. Nylund earlier in this webinar. So now I think it only remains for me to conclude by saying that I hope you all have enjoyed this webinar and will find it useful for your activities and plans ahead. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Sjaastad. So yeah, on my side, this has certainly been very useful. And as I noted already, I mean, we are a number of different players will now assess the regulation and think strategically about where we can contribute and position ourselves. And this includes my sector, research and development. And we of course note the corresponding emphasis on batteries in mechanisms such as Horizon Europe, for example. And we look forward to interacting with national and European research assets and support structures in the coming months as we do our preparations. So then again, just to end by saying that we've been a nice collective of institutions arranging this seminar, this webinar. The mission of Norway to the European Union, Norcor, the Agder cluster, the South Norway European Office, and the University of Agder. So again, thank you to the speakers, thank you to the audience for very good questions, and please have a nice day, everyone. Thank you.